Good morning. You're listening to the Blaine's World Show, heard here on 103.7 on the dial. This is Blaine Greenfield. I'm your host, and we're here Wednesdays at 9 a.m. And you can also watch on WPVM's Facebook page. Here, I'm now in my lovely downtown studio in Fairview, North Carolina. And what we do each week, we focus on the Asheville theater scene, as well as on positive news and information about people and organizations in both Western North Carolina and throughout the country. And to that end, it's my pleasure to introduce my first guest, and he is Stephen Weese. Am I pronouncing it correctly?
That's correct.
Okay, welcome aboard, Steve. Stephen, you can wave to all your fans and friends in Facebook world.
That's right. Hello.
Okay, great. Stephen Weese is the CEO of the local Asheville media company, Marvelous Spiral Studios. He is a producer, writer, director, and actor. His first feature film, Altered States, was released on Amazon Prime.
Altered Spirits.
Amazon Altered Spirits.
Yes.
Was released on Amazon Prime. He's also known for his voice work in video games and animation. His new documentary, Adrenal Fatigue, Stress Maladaptation,
yes.
has just been released. And let me ask you this, Stephen.
Yeah.
So, kind of an interesting background there. When you were a kid, where'd you grow up?
I grew up in West Virginia.
Okay. And when you were growing up in West Virginia, did you know you wanted to be this voiceover artist, this film producer, director, actor, all this kind of stuff?
Well, it's sort of, there were signs. What happened is my mom did Amway, and she got all the cassettes to listen to for Amway, which is sort of like the old school multi-level marketing for people who don't know that. Right. And they had all these training cassettes, and my mom did it for a year or two, and then she quit. But we had this tape recorder and all these tapes. And I said, Mom, can I have these? And she said, sure. So I took them and I recorded over them, and I'd get all my friends and we'd do shows, and I'd make up shows. We'd do like pretend the news, and we do commercials, and we do events. And, we thought it was hilarious. Of course, it was, very childish, but it was a lot of fun. And I was sort of in charge of that, and I'd go around and arrange it. And so I was sort of producing and writing and acting already when I was, before I was even 10 years old.
Now, when did you go on beyond that in school? Did you act and do stuff like that?
I did. What's really funny is I went to Fairfax High School in Virginia, and I was in honors chemistry, and somehow I ended up skipping chemistry every day and going to the drama class. And no one ever said anything. The drama teacher let me stay in there, and we'd go. And I ended up one day, one of the kids was absent, and they said, "You be his part." And so I did. So I played the role. And then I ended up being in the show. And then it was interesting because Christina Hendricks from Mad Men and Firefly and some other things went to my school, and we were in a play together. We ended up being in a play together in Virginia there. Right. And but because I skipped chemistry, I ended up being in a play. But I loved that. And I loved doing the improv. The theater sports was a lot of fun. But there wasn't really, back when I was a lot younger, there wasn't a whole lot of like knowledge about voiceover. We just imagined somewhere in Los Angeles these famous people like Mel Blanc were, doing Looney Tunes, but I never thought much about it past that.
Do you remember the first play you were in?
Yeah, that was the one where I it was called Something's Rotten in the State of Denmark. It was a one act that was basically making fun of Hamlet. And so I was Horatio, and it was just gag after gag after gag, this one act. So it was really a lot of fun.
Because I had this idea, Stephen, I told people in the Asheville area, I'd love to do a production where somebody has a fundraiser for a local theater, and everybody would do their very first role, So when you did that, I assume you don't have video of that production?
No, I do have some pictures of us on stage, though.
But wouldn't that be great, that you could recreate it so that you could then show other people, here's what you did when you were in high school or something, your very first production.
Oh, so, yeah.
Cool. So you then were doing some work in high school. Where'd you go from there in terms of developing this whole thing you're doing?
Well, honestly, what happened is I had two things I liked was computers and the arts. And when I went to go to college, I looked at it, I saw my dad had been unemployed many years, and the family barely struggled to get by because it was like, during the 80s and the depression that happened then. And I said, I better do computers because I need to live. I need to eat. And I love computers. So, and I have a master's in IT anyway, but all the time I was doing computers, but in the background, I was in choir. Right, I traveled to Israel with a choir, and we sang in for the Jerusalem 3,000-year anniversary. Crazy enough, and then I was in theater all the time. I was in musicals and plays, and I kept doing that. And but then I graduated, and I was like, well, okay, I go work. I worked for Lockheed Martin. I worked for the CIA. In my first job out of college, I got a top secret clearance, and I worked on computers for the CIA. But all the time, I was still doing stuff. And then a friend of mine from Virginia there had said, hey, I'm going to make this short film for this 48-hour project, and I want you to be in it. And I did this film, and I was like, this is the best thing ever. And I know there's plenty of people who love theater, but once I did film, I was like, I love this 10 times more than theater, and I want to do this. And so I really got hooked on film after we did that short film with my friend Laura.
So what got you to Asheville?
Well, it was a long trip. I was in the DC area for a while, like I said, when I worked for the CIA. And then I realized it was very expensive there and the traffic was terrible and I could live somewhere else. So I went to Raleigh, which I liked for a while. But then I actually started having some signs of my adrenal fatigue illness, which we'll, talk more about later. But I didn't realize what it was then. But once I sort of recovered, I said, I'm going to go and hurry up and have some adventures before I get too old. So then I went to Los Angeles. And I ended up being there for 13 years. So, and unfortunately, I had a friend who had a studio, so I got to get in. Immediately, I was in an anime. I got to be in anime Hellsing Ultimate, which is a really popular anime. If you ever seen it, I'm the guy who gets sent to kill Alucard. I'm a SWAT team leader sent to kill the main character vampire, right? So I'm going to die. But I die very spectacularly. It's very memorable. So a lot of people remember that. And then my first week there too, I was in a movie by Walter Koenig, who played Chekhov in Star Trek. It was his film, and I got to sit next to him just coincidentally as in the courtroom scene for this movie called Inalienable that he produced. And I was just like on cloud nine. And then I got to do a lot of things out there. But I produced my own film, Altered Spirits, which is was on Amazon for a while. Amazon pulled a couple of years ago a bunch of their indie films off of Amazon for some reason, to the disappointment of many indie filmmakers, I'm sure. And then I got to a point in Asheville where I had my production company for voiceover, and we were doing some games and animation 2 or 3 times a year and things like that. But I realized I'd been there over a decade and I wasn't really going to get any further. And I'm not getting any younger. And I realized I look a lot younger than I really am, by the way. But I was like, okay, I'm in my 40s now, and I want to be able to buy a house, and it's so expensive in LA. Basically, somebody said this. It's so appropriate. They said Los Angeles is like an amusement park. You stay as long as you can until you have to go home. And right. And I didn't have any savings. I mean, all my money went to just living out there or my creative productions, and I didn't have any money. I'm here, like I said, in my 40s, and I don't even have any savings. And I'm like, I can't just keep doing this forever. And I didn't make it big, right? My ship didn't come in. It still could. I have a lot of, things going on. But so what I did is I researched where I wanted to live next. And I wanted to live somewhere warm. Now, I know it's not as warm as LA in Asheville, but I couldn't live somewhere cold. My blood is too thin now from being in LA for over a decade, and I wanted to live somewhere where I could afford a house. I know people say, generally speaking, Asheville is expensive, but not compared to LA, right? It's actually possible that I could afford a house here, right? So I want to buy a nice house here with some land, and probably outside of the city, obviously, somewhere. And I wanted somewhere that was creative and artistic, right? I didn't just want to go to the South where it's warm. I wanted to go to a town where not only they had artistic, creative, fun people, but where they had people who believe in community, because there's no real sense of community in LA. It's just scattered neighborhoods and everybody's out for themselves and everybody's trying to hustle it and whatever they're doing, but here I sensed when I visited, because I visited here and Athens, Georgia, to look into where I wanted to live next, because when I moved here, this was going to be it. I'm going to stay, right? This is my last place I'm going to move to, unless some amazing opportunity comes up somewhere. But I wanted to live in Asheville. And so I researched it. And eventually COVID made it possible, because I was teaching at a film college in LA, and they went all online for over a year. And I told my boss, I said, do I need to be in LA? And she said, no. It's like, all right, I've got 6 months, 9 months to live in Asheville and find a job for when this one runs out, So I took it, I was like, this is my ticket to go to Asheville. And it was a little scary because I really didn't know anyone here. I actually, our mutual friend, Mike, I knew because I met him when I visited before. Very nice guy, showed me around town. One of the reasons I ended up here. But it was a little scary, but I really loved the place so much that I really wanted to be part of it. And I know that a lot of people are coming from other places like California, and I was hoping that people wouldn't be like, oh, another California guy, but I intend to contribute to the community. And, that's partly what I'm doing by having my company here and having, local actors be part of my voiceover roster so they can audition for things when we get them.
And we'll give a shout out since you mentioned Mike Martinelli, if you're listening or watching. Hey, Mike. And,
yes, thank you, Mike.
He introduced us. But one of the things you said was kind of interesting, which I think is nice about Asheville, is that when I moved here, maybe about 13 years ago, the word was, and it's still, I think, the case, that nobody is ever born in Asheville. So that, like you, I knew nobody, just came here. But it's a pretty welcoming community, and it's pretty easy to meet people, which I think is great. But then go from there to the fact that you not only came to Asheville, but you actually then started your local-based company. And talk about that process, what that entailed.
Well, it's, I had the company in LA, and it's very expensive. All the fees and everything for doing a company in LA is very expensive. So I was very happy to find it's like a quarter of the cost to just do a business in North Carolina as compared to LA. Of course, the taxes are higher, rent is higher, so this is part of my model is now I want to reach out to my old clients and people I worked with on games and stuff and say, look, I can do the same work for you, but like for 3/4 of the cost because my expenses are so much less here. And I'm hoping that, and I've been working with my local talent. I've actually, once I got here, I knew, all right, I need to go to the local actors group. And I went to Facebook and the filmmakers group and the actors group. And I said, I want local actors. I want you to audition. And so I sent out auditions for a game. I worked on a game made by Sega called Citizens of Space. And so I directed it and produced the voiceover for it. And I'm several characters in it because I can be, right? But also the guy who made the game said, I want you to be this guy. I'm like, okay. And I have some roles in video games. I'm like a main character in Shadowverse, Dietrich, and I'm in Blade and Soul and some other things. So, I have a little bit of clout, I guess, for that. So I'm a few characters in that too, but I used the auditions that I already had for Citizens of Space and sent them out to my local people and said, look, try this because it's a ton of different characters. It's a very over-the-top silly game, stereotype, or not stereotype, but caricatures. That's the word I'm looking for. So very fun. And so I had a bunch of people audition. And of course, I'd say about 2/3 of them I put on my roster. 1/3 didn't make the cut, but I was pleasantly surprised that we have a lot of nice talent here. Not everyone has great home recording equipment, but that's okay too, because I have equipment and I've actually been partnering with some local studios to be able to use their facilities if we need them too. So really I made a new website. I had all the actors audition and we did a promotion. We did a free voiceover for a video game just to get all my local guys experience. We had a contest for Marvelous Spiral Studios it was the indie game contest. And so we got really lucky, and this great indie game called Aaron's Adventure submitted for the contest, and they were definitely the best game. It was a role-playing game. There were over 50 roles to voice. Oh, okay. Right? So, and usually what we do to save time is for things like this, video games, each actor will play 3 or 4 roles. So I'll send up the auditions, and I tell my actors, audition for as many of these as you fit. And then I'll go through, it's kind of complicated casting process, and I check off who can do what. And then if they could do 3 or more, then, then I'll try to put them in those characters. And then, it was still kind of, last year was COVID stuff. So we had to take lots of precautions and, with everything. But some people had home studios and I was able to remotely record. And then some people came here to my home studio and we recorded and we did this game, and it's a really good game and it won some awards. It's called Aaron's Adventure. It's on Steam. Right. And so that, was really good. And I got to meet and work with a bunch of the locals, which I was really happy about. Our mutual friend, Mike Yao, he plays a dwarf in the game, right? So he's one of the dwarf characters. And I think there's only one dwarf, actually. They're kind of rare in this game. So he plays a dwarf. And but he's great. And so I got to, meet some of the folks, and I know them. And, what I've been doing is trying to get, business. I've contacted over 200 video game companies and, message them and, just trying to get in their system. A lot of the way the game works is people continue to work with the people they worked with before, right? Because they don't have any reason to change. But I'm trying to get, just a few companies that'll be interested in using us. One especially, I'm trying to get in touch with Epic Games because they're right over there, basically in Raleigh. And so I'm hoping that I can get a hold of somebody at Epic. I've been trying and say, hey, look, why don't you work with another North Carolina company to do your voiceover instead of farming it out to LA? Because I've got really good talent. I've got experience directing over 10 years, and I can deliver what you need. So I'm hoping that we'll be able to make some more relationships like that here.
And Stephen, if I can jump in here, we should mention to folks, if they're listening or watching, that you'd conceivably be interested in speaking to them in one of two areas. One, if they have any game work or anything they'd like to get some voiceover talent, they can contact you. Also, you were telling me off the air that you're building up your roster, so people are still invited to submit their information to you. Is that true?
Yeah, that's certainly true. Yeah, as long as they're local to Asheville.
Yeah, how would they do that?
So you go to the website, marvelousspiralstudios.com, and there's a contact page.
Okay, and that's the best thing to get in touch with you. And let me kind of just spend the remaining time talk a little bit about another project you've been involved in. So aside from being in this voiceover business and having this company going, you also made a film, which is kind of an interesting story unto itself. What gave you the idea to make this second film?
Well, I had finished Altered Spirits. We finished shooting Principal Photography, as you say, in 2011. And the reason I made the film is because I got very, very sick in 2010. And I was diagnosed with chronic fatigue syndrome, which doctors do recognize. And I was able to do some treatments that I found that were sort of alternative, and I got mostly better. And I thought, oh my gosh, I'm going to make a feature film before I get sick again, or this, I don't know. Nobody understands this. We don't know why people have it exactly. And, so I hurried up and made a feature. I made that sci-fi because I always wanted to make a sci-fi or a fantasy. And I made that. And then while we were editing in post-production in 2013, I had a relapse, and it was the worst relapse. This is my third crash, actually. I had one in Raleigh there in 2006, and then 2010, and then 2013 was the worst. And I realized something was seriously wrong with me, and I had to do all these crazy things to get better. And I went through a journey, and the journey was very lonely and miserable. I was single. I lived by myself in Los Angeles because I'd moved out there to be in the industry, and I had to just kind of navigate this by myself. And it took me 2 or 3 years really before I started to even feel okay. But in that time, all the research I'd done, there's thousands, maybe millions of other people who have this same problem, and they have the same difficulties that I had. They were even unable to take care of themselves, then have to manage their own health care and figure out what's wrong with them, and, be their own doctor in a sense. And, run into people not believing them, doctors telling them, hey, adrenal fatigue's not a real thing. You can't have that. So I went through all this, and I said, I'm a filmmaker. So I'm going to make a film about adrenal fatigue, and then I can share everything I've learned, over these years, to help other people get better. And so that was the idea. Like in my other film, I, got a distributor. It went on Amazon and several other places, and it was, ostensibly to make money. But that's not why any creator makes things, right? But this was, public service. I took the skills that I had, and it took me 3 years and probably thousands and thousands of dollars of my own money. Definitely not probably.
Let me ask you to back up a little bit. For the benefit of people who don't know what adrenal fatigue is, what is it?
So adrenal fatigue is sort of this gray area of fatigue and other symptoms where usually it's not, chronic fatigue is usually on all the time. You're always tired. You're always, but adrenal fatigue, you kind of go in and out of it. You'll just get extremely exhausted, and then you'll be fine, and you'll be extremely exhausted. And usually what comes with adrenal fatigue is this sort of cycle inversion where you're tired during the day, and then you start waking up when it's bedtime. And there's also a lot of insomnia involved with it. Like a lot of people, you can't sleep. And so then you just get even worse because you can't sleep at night. You're expected to do work during the day. You're always tired, and then there's the anxiety part of it. A lot of people, have anxiety where they just can't seem to handle life anymore. It becomes very difficult just to do normal things. It's very overwhelming. So those are kind of major symptoms of adrenal fatigue.
So when did you first start noticing that you were having this condition?
Well, in 2010, when I had the doctor, I went to the doctor and they tested me for everything and says, all the blood works fine, all the tests are fine, which is what happens when you have this. I was actually in a bookstore and I felt like I was supposed to get this book. It was sticking out of the shelf like an inch. And I felt this pull like I was supposed to get it. And I pull it out and it's this book on adrenal fatigue, right? By Dr. Wilson. It's called The 21st Century Stress Syndrome. And it's like 20 years old now or whatever, but I read it and it matched everything that I had. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is it. And that's partly how I got better that second time in the second crash, because I did what it suggested in the book. I started doing Qigong and I changed my diet and, finally went to an alternative doctor that was able to work with me on some of these unusual treatments, but yeah, so that was when I really learned about adrenal fatigue and what it was and believed that I have it, even though it's, can anyone give you an official diagnosis for something that doesn't exist officially? Right. So it's hard to say.
But since you had that diagnosis, or since you've been doing this other stuff, you quote now better?
That's a good question. I'd say I'm about 70 to 80% of what I used to be. My current symptoms now are fatigue spells where I will get tired very suddenly for 2 or 3 hours at a time. I will get very, very bad headaches. That's another one that people get. I get really bad headaches. And then sometimes anxiety and insomnia will happen. And then maybe once or twice a month, I have a day where I can't do anything. I'll just have no energy level. And usually I'll get inflammation and pain in my body as well. But it's only compared to what it was before. That was almost every day before. Now it's only 1 or 2 days a month, and mostly because I started doing clean eating and doing a special nutrition program and things like that.
And so that's what you now take, or somebody who has adrenal fatigue. Well, let's talk about the process there. Somebody has this condition that nobody can actually diagnose correctly. It reminds me a little bit, Stephen.
Yeah.
Years ago, Lyme's disease was a big thing, and including my wife. Everybody thought they had Lyme's disease, but they couldn't quite prove it. Nobody, there weren't definitive tests that could say you had Lyme's disease. So a lot of people thought they had it. So if somebody has this, what do you recommend? We'll talk about the film in a second, but they could also get the book, or is there anything they should do at some point in time?
Well, the big thing, and one of the main conclusions of the documentary, is that it's good to see someone who practices what we call functional medicine. So functional medicine is sort of a combination of Western medicine plus Eastern and alternative methods. Usually those doctors will, right off the bat, agree that it exists. So at least you can start there. But as I found during the making of the documentary, there can be several different causes of it. And it's mostly due to some type of stress, whether it's physical, emotional, or chemical. And depending on what kind of stress caused it, you might have a different way of treating it. But the functional medicine doctors are really the best, what we think are the best way to start.
And how do you find one?
Really, I would look up, functional medicine,
Okay.
Just type in functional medicine doctor and your city.
Okay, and you'll be able to find it.
Yeah, and then they even do, now that we, in this virtual world, like you and I are doing right now, right? They have virtual treatments too. They'll have you do that, and they can order tests and have you do them and mail them off and things like that.
Now talk about the documentary then, so that you'd gone through this journey over a period of time, and you had this condition, or you had this adrenal fatigue, and you wanted to share what you went through with other people. Was that the idea?
Well, it wasn't so much to share what I went through. It's more that I wanted to help people. And being sick like this made me realize that really my main purpose in life is to help people with the skills that God has given me. And one of those is filmmaking. So I felt like it was almost my obligation to put together everything I could, all in one place. So if you watch this documentary, actually, that would be a good starting place. If you think you have it, is watch the documentary, because it goes through, I interview over 20 experts on it. And they talk about all the different things that they know causes it and ways to get better, and why it's difficult to be recognized by mainstream medicine. You know, it really covers all the bases, I think, to get started. But also, I did it for people so they're going to watch this and say, I'm not alone. And someone understands me, someone believes in me. And for all those people that their friends and their family and their doctor doesn't listen to.
Who are some of the people you interviewed?
Interviewed Dr. Daniel Pompa. He does a lot of fasting and things like that. He's really good. Dr. Nicole Avena, she's an expert on diet and talks about how we eat too much sugar. And she has some really amazing thoughts in there. Dr. Jack Tips is a clinical nutritionist, and he has some really good, things there about the adrenals and stuff like that. And I've also got sort of some women's hormone specialists who talk about it from the women's side. Dr. Sonia Jensen. She's excellent for that kind of stuff too.
How do you find all these people?
Well, it was kind of like, I feel like it was divinely orchestrated. You know, I interviewed nutrition expert Wendy Myers, who's a expert in toxic metals. And she led me to Dr. Pompa and put me in touch with him. And he used his network to get me in touch with doctors all over the country who helped treat adrenal fatigue. And so I traveled around the country and interviewed these different doctors. And they were all amazing. I mean, I had more interviews than I can use for the documentary. The doctors were so good.
Now, you did this all, so you actually did it in person, or did you do some of it virtually?
No, it was all in person. Yeah. It was all filmed right before COVID. So it wasn't, fortunately I shot it, like 2019, I guess. So I traveled around to, different places, and cause it's high quality. I wanted to get really good footage, and you just can't get the same quality virtually. So I traveled to the locations, set up light. I had sometimes I brought another crew with me, cameraman or whatever. And, we just, tried to make this. I mean, this could be, I feel like it could be on Netflix. Like, the quality of this is as good as something you would watch, but I didn't want to sell it, right? I didn't want to make money off of this. I wanted to get it out there for the public to help people.
And talk about that too, also, Stephen, because I was very impressed with the fact that if somebody now wants to see this, they can do so, and there's no charge to see this?
No, not at all. Just go to adrenaldocumentary.com. And you can see there's a trailer, there's some other information. I'm also updating the YouTube channel every so often, putting up new information. I'm going to be putting up some other interview footage that I didn't have time to fit into the documentary, right? So the channel's going to keep going, and we're going to continue to update that as well. But yeah, just go to adrenaldocumentary.com, and you'll see there's a link to watch the full documentary for free.
Now, in terms of preference on your part now, so you've done a film, you did a documentary. Moving ahead in the future, do you see yourself doing more documentaries or films, or what do you see yourself doing?
I feel like, probably cost-wise, a documentary is going to cost like $250,000, $300,000 to make, whereas a feature film is more like $2 million at the least, in terms of actual everything you need. So I could see somebody watching this documentary and hiring me to make another one. I don't intend to do that much work, because this was all me, right? I was the editor, I was the director, I was the producer, I did the color correction, I did the sound, I did the graphics, and I don't want to do that again. That's a ton of work. But if someone hired me and I had all the money, I could hire graphics department, editor, and I would direct it and produce it and let, but it was, a ton of work. And, but what I really love is animation and video games, and I'm reaching out. I've written 2 animation now, and I've also written 2 video games, and one is actually in production right now. It's called Letters from the Moon, and it's going to be available for Android and on Steam. And that's about a Chinese American astronaut who crash lands on the moon, and she gets stranded there, but finds an alien civilization underneath the surface and explores that, so she's able to survive. But yeah, I really love my real big loves are sci-fi and fantasy. And I've also got a sci-fi movie I'd like to make, a fantasy movie, along with a 4-book series and video games. I have big dreams. I've been out there in LA for a while, but I love this stuff. And so I'm hoping that, whatever comes, but I do believe that I will at some point be making a particular animation in the future.
Great. And Stephen, to wrap up, again, to repeat, if folks want to get in touch with you, we'll talk about 2 different ways. If they want to get in touch with you with respect to your company, best bet to reach that is what?
marvelousspiralstudios.com.
Okay, find
And
out
there's a contact form there.
more about the video, more about the voiceover work, some of the other stuff you're doing, and specifically if they want to catch this film, which we encourage people to do if they want to learn more about adrenal fatigue. Best bet is to do what?
Adrenaldocumentary.com. You can watch it there, and there's also a contact form and some more information there.
Okay, I'd like to thank you very much for not only being my guest this first half hour on the Blaine's World Show, but also offering this magnificent documentary to people to see. And I have it down on my list. I'll be mentioned to our listeners that they're listening to the Blaine's World Show, and we're heard every Wednesday here on WPVM 103.7. WPVM's mission is to foster community through programming that cultivates dialogue to inform and entertain. The station provides the medium for artists, businesses, community leaders, and nonprofits to share their voice on live radio. Listeners are invited to help support WPVM's efforts by making a tax-deductible contribution. You can do so by going to the website wpvmfm.org and looking at the donate option on the upper right-hand side. And second, we're going to see if we have my second guest on air. I'm really looking forward to meeting him and finding more about Lyle Rickards. We're going to now see if he's with us. Let's see if he's with us now as we kind of work this out. And I think we're just about setting up, and he's setting up here. So I'll mention to folks that as Lyle is setting up, Lyle is a busker in the Asheville area. You may have seen him around. He's also a champion Dulcimer player. And if you never heard a Dulcimer play before, you guys are in for a treat. And Lyle, as Lyle is setting up, I'll talk a little bit about what I know of him, which is not a heck of a lot. But at one time, we both lived and worked in the same area, and that was Bucks County, Pennsylvania. So it's kind of a real treat to find out that Lyle not only was at Bucks County, the area, living and working, but he also knew some of the same people. And we'll say hello to them in just a second. But Lyle, I think you just about set up. Why don't you say hello to all your fans and friends in Facebook world? Okay, as Lyle's setting up with Steven's help. And Lyle,
hey, out there in Facebook world, I think I'm on.
Okay, great. Well, good to see you. And like I said, it was really a small world to find out that we were both from the same area. And
I heard that accent and I knew we were close.
Okay, I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit since I don't have your background in front of me. If you could just kind of give you a Reader's Digest version of your background.
My background. Well, let me see. My name's Lyle Rickards. I'm from Bucks County, Pennsylvania. Like you said, I was born and raised there. Done a bunch of things in my life. I'm getting up there. I'm 60 years old now, but I always hung out in the New Hope area in Bucks County and started playing music at a pretty early age. I've worked a bunch of tourist attractions in Bucks County. If everybody knows Bucks County, it's a little river town on Delaware River, right across the river from New Jersey, and only about an hour away from Midtown Manhattan, or an hour away from Philadelphia and an hour away from the Jersey Shore. So we got the best of both worlds, kind of a historic area. And I worked for years on it was called the Mule Barge. It was an old coal barge that went up and down the old Delaware Canal, pulled by mules. And I was kind of a tour guide musician feller that kind of gave like a living history.
Were you playing the Dulcimer?
I was. Yeah, I was playing the Dulcimer. I guess I started it when I was in high school as a summer job, just walking the mules. Actually, there was like different jobs that different people did.
When did you start playing the Dulcimer?
Hard to say. The first time I ever saw a Dulcimer was it's an obscure little stray instrument. Let me show this to you.
Do it, yeah.
So Dulcimers are little strange little Appalachian folk instruments from kind of down here. They are on the lap played, which is going to be funny because you're not going to be able to see it when I'm playing. But it's a stringed instrument with frets, similar to a guitar, similar to a banjo, but it's its own instrument, kind of maybe for the most part a real American folk instrument. They came out of the Appalachian Mountains. It might have been something else that another culture brought, like maybe a zither-like instrument that the Dutch brought there was an instrument real close to it. It's called a Hummel. But down here, it kind of showed up, and maybe it got through that wonderful thing we call folk process. It changed and evolved into its own instrument. I tend to call this a mountain dulcimer. There's a couple different variants of dulcimers. Some are called hammer dulcimers.
How do you learn how to play it?
How did I learn? Man, I don't read a stitch of music. This was the instrument I started with, but now I play about 12 instruments, and I don't know an A from a B flat. I just play them. I don't let the fact that I don't read music get in the way with me playing music for a living.
What other instruments do you play?
Well, I started with the dulcimer, and then I started playing fiddle, banjo, mandolin, another instrument called an auto harp. I see what you're doing. Another instrument called an auto harp. We're going to do some changing of the furniture, see if we can get myself up. That was the perfect thing to use. It's funny that you had them. There's little risers for a bed.
Well, it's great. I have, as you're showing that, so I sit sometimes on a phone book, so that's even better than a phone book. That'll be
this
great.
This could fly, Orville.
Okay, great. But it's interesting, too, when you learn the dulcimer, I assume you didn't watch YouTube to learn how to play it. Is that correct?
No, it was before. It was pre-YouTube, pre-cell phone, pre-internet. I got it from old records. The first time I saw a dulcimer, though, when I was a kid. Remember the old show, The Waltons?
I do, sure.
Remember The Waltons? Okay, I found this out later in life. First season, episode 2. John Boy played a dulcimer. He played a dulcimer. For a girl that was staying with the Baldwin sisters, the old moonshine ladies. And I heard that noise. Here, wait a minute. I heard that noise and it stuck in my head, and I was fascinated by it. I must have been 13 or 14 when the Waltons first came out. And then about 16 years old, I was at a craft fair in my town of Doylestown, Pennsylvania. And there was a dulcimer maker, and I was with my mom, and I said, "Oh, there's that thing I saw on the Waltons all these years."
By the way, if I can ask you, can you bring again the mic a little bit closer or something when we had you change seating?
Oh, how's that?
Better, thanks.
Better.
So you got your first dulcimer. You were how old?
About 16. Yeah, about 16 years old. I got one. My mom got me that dulcimer that I saw at the craft fair, and it was not more than 5 months later. A musician on that mule barge I was talking about quit on the job, just walked off. And the owner of the barge, or the managers, knew I had that instrument in my car because I was always playing it, but not, in front of people really. And he just said, "Go get that instrument and play for this group of people on the barge ride that was going up and down the canal." And that lasted 17 years.
Very cool. So that was the very first time you got paid to play the dulcimer?
First time I ever got paid for doing playing music.
Very
and then
cool.
I just started playing music, and I did it every day seasonally for 17 years. I was kind of a tour guide. I dressed up very similar to how I'm dressed now. I never dressed. I had to dress kind of like an old canaler, in that, like, we were doing like, reenacting somewhat of an old canaler, and yeah, that's how it started. And I never changed my wardrobe. I still look the same. But cool. I started playing music. I started playing all these instruments. I started really getting involved with folk music and the tradition. And for years I did it. And I've done other things. I started going to art school and learning art history. I worked for art galleries for years and antique shops. And then I opened my own antique shop and art gallery for about 10, 11 years. And but I was always playing music. I got tired for working for people because I always wanted to go away and play music on the weekends, at a music festival, or at least go to a music festival, like a folk festival, and learn. And so I could never get that done when I was working for other people. So I said, well, I'm going to open up my own. So I was able to go to the store.
Go back to when you were a 16-year-old kid. So you were on the river, and I know the river very well. Give me an example of what you might be starting to sing if you're sort of having a bunch of tourists coming into Bucks County. What would you be playing?
All right. Well, I think you can see this still smart. I think you can kind of get
We
kind
do,
of an
yeah.
essence of where I'm playing it and how I'm
Right.
playing it. This might work right here.
Yeah, works great.
Let me see. Back in the day. Well, I'm going to show this to a bunch of my friends that we used to work on the mule bars. I'll have to share this with them, and they'll know this song.
Very nice.
Things like that. Can you hear it all right?
What's the name of that song?
That was two tunes together, which tends to be the tradition too. First one was called Soldier's Joy, and the second part was called, let me see, I think it was called Cumberland Gap. And
Oh, it's cool. So you know that all by heart?
Yeah. Well, you do it by in my case, you did it by repetition. There were 7 rides a day, and I think when I first started playing the dulcimer in front of people, I was, nice and slow, and then over and over, 7 sets, 7 rides a day, 45 minutes of playing and talking about history and talking about the instrument, singing songs. I got better and better at it, and I think that's just what happens in folk music. You just, a lot of these, particularly the fiddle tunes, like, when I say fiddle tunes, I'm playing these old tunes that are in the tradition, and they're all for dancing. They weren't for concert. They were for dancing. They were for people coming off the mountain or wherever and getting together, and there'd be a dance. And so dances tend to be mathematical and 4/4, like square dancing, 4/4. So they tend to be repetitive. There's 1 part, 2 parts, 1 part, 2 parts, octave, little lead. And so the instrument it lends itself to that and that kind of dance kind of mode. So they're very melodic and dancey, and not to say that you can't play sad things on these things, but a lot of the music was for dancing and socializing.
Now you telling me off the air that you not only play the dulcimer, I see the harmonica, but you also sing. But you explained to me, at least from a busking standpoint, singing is sometimes hard to do.
Well, busking and busking is an unusual profession. Is it? I've been busking off and on. I mean, I even considered what I did on the mule barge busking, because I never was paid by the company that had the mule barge. I came on as a guarantee that they'd have somebody to do the history, and I worked for tips. So therefore, I guess I was a busker before I even knew what busking was. That word busker to me didn't exist for many years. I just was just a folk singer, and I did it on the street sometimes, mostly out of just necessity. As a musician, a lot of us live gig to gig. We have a gig every other weekend, or we play someplace, and if you want to do it for a living, you either have to be really good and have a really good agent, or like they did in the old days, you had a good agent that booked you, or you really worked your butt off, or you had to work a second job. You did something during the week for money, and then you played music for fun, and maybe you get to make a little money out of it. But busking is a different thing. Busking is a profession. I know lots of people that do this for a living, as do I, for a sole living. This is what I do. How I feel is that I was meant to do it. I was busking before like I said, I was busking before I even knew I was a busker. and coming, doing more traveling. I've traveled a lot in the last 20 years, particularly in the last, say, 8 years. I kind of gave up my life in Bucks County to be able to kind of expand my horizons. I just didn't want to be that guy that played every once a month at the coffee house. I started promoting myself a little more and playing more festivals, coffee houses. This is music that, you know, you're not going to see a lot at, like, I'm not a bar player. I'm not that guy who plays on Friday night for the drinking crowd. I've done it. It's not my favorite thing to do. But busking is a way to make money every day. You know, it's direct action. I don't have to wait till 1:30 in the morning to get paid from a bar owner who gives me the slip, you know, or a festival promoter that didn't make enough money at the festival. It's a way every day to make money. I play outside in the open air. I'm not in a smoky bar, which I'm not really prone to do. It's a direct action. There's no stage to hold an audience back, to engage. I love meeting people, and I love entertaining. People walk by, they stop, they listen. If they like it, they give me $1 or $2 or more. I like it when it's more. And
What got you to Asheville?
Asheville got me, it's like I said, I had a business before. I had an art and antique business, and
By the way, to give a shout out, with a mutual friend of ours, and that was with.
yeah, we actually have some mutual friends back in Bucks County. I kind of did a lot of consignment in my shop. I had this great little barn on a river road, on Root River Road in Point Pleasant, Pennsylvania, is where I kind of hung my hat for years. And it's near New Hope, Pennsylvania, which is a big tourist town, lots of antiques and art. But I kind of like was upriver from that, but all those people would have to pass me to get to New Hope. And so I had a great little barn that looked like it was in pretty bad condition, and looked like maybe out front looked like a junk shop, but you'd see people playing old time music out front. So it was attractive. And I was filled with art and antiques, and my specialty was the Bucks County Impressionist paintings and Pennsylvania furniture, or early 19th century, late 18th century, along with every other imaginable thing you could sell on the side of the road as a kind of a roadside attraction. But I gave it up. The economy kind of tanked. I had trouble. I had a fire that took me out of business. And at the time, I was taking care of my father, who was getting up there in his age. And it went to a point of just staying with him, to a point of almost constant care. So I kind of let the business slip. And after he passed, my father was an old Navy guy. And, you know, he was the guy that always told me to go out and get a real job. And you know, I never thought we saw eye to eye, although he was a musician on his part-time hours. He was a great jazz musician in Bucks County for years. And I always wasn't sure he understood me. And just before he passed, he said, "Hey kid, when I pass, you know, there's not going to be a lot of money, but get yourself that RV you've always wanted to do, and go play music, kid. Don't settle for anything
Really?
else."
What a great story.
Yeah, and he passed, and that's exactly what I did. I bought a motorhome, a small motorhome, and I left Bucks County, and I just started driving. And I've been on the road now for about 7 years, traveling around wherever I can. But in that traveling, I wanted to go to Key West for some reason. I was like, I'm going to go to Key West and just be like Jimmy Buffett, you know, and play music on Sunset Pier. And I kind of made an itinerary, places I wanted to go. Asheville was one. I'd heard Asheville was a cool place, and good music, and the belly of the beast of this traditional Appalachian music, this old time music that I guess what we would call it, instead of like bluegrass, it was more like old time, you know, the real early stuff. And so I wanted to stop by there, and I was going up from Old Fort up to Black Mountain, up that mountain, and my junky motorhome barely made it up that mountain, and I overheated, and I pulled up in Black Mountain in front of the White Horse, which is a right. club in Black Mountain. And I walked inside. They were open, but they were closed. The door was open, and I found a guy behind the bar, you know, and I said, "Hey, I just kind of overheated. Can I keep my car here for a little bit?" And a nice fella behind the bar, who was the owner, said, "Yeah, sure, go ahead."
And we'll give a shout out, by the way. Bob was just a guest on my show a couple of weeks ago. But
Bob, was he? Bob's one of my favorite people.
Right, one of the best. Bob, if you're listening, we're talking about you.
Well,
And
Bob changed my life because
really?
I said, well, I'm a musician. I'm looking for a gig. And Bob said, well, we have an open mic tonight. And I said, great. And after the open mic, he said, I said, I love it. And he goes, oh yeah, I can get you shows. I really like what you do. And I did well at that open mic. And I said, can I stay in the parking lot overnight? Well, and he said, sure. And I said, do I have to worry about, as somebody who kind of, this new term that we hear now, stealth camping? I was van life before it was van life, but he said, I said, do I have to worry about the police knocking on my door or anything? Because I've had that problem. You have that problem when you're on the road trying to find clandestine places to park. We're not one to go into a campground, and pay $50 a night. We look for parking lots, Walmarts, Cracker Barrels, anything. And he said, oh, you can stay there for a couple of days. And I said, do I have to worry? And he said, well, let me see. And he sat in his office and he got on his computer, and I saw him pulling things and doing stuff, and the printer came out, and he printed this thing out. And there was I hope I'm not going to get Bob in trouble in Black Mountain, but Bob said, well, here, try this. And on this piece of paper, it looked very official, but completely bogus parking permit for the town of Black Mountain. Had colors, had the town seal, was signed, had numbers on it, like license numbers. And so I was there. I ended up staying in that parking lot for about a month. But about the first week, I got door knocked by the police, a suspicious vehicle in the parking lot, which they always say. And I'm bright orange, my motorhome. So I told him I was waiting for him 4 days before. I couldn't hide. And so I said, well, I got a permit. And they looked in the flashlight at the permit in the window, and they looked at each other, and well, I guess you're all right then. So I stayed in Black Mountain for about a month and a half, 2 months. And then I commuted into Asheville, and I started.
Do you still have the RV?
I still have the RV. Yeah, I still have it. It's been, I've had it now for 8 years. It's been my home. It's about 19 feet long. It's very small. And I've been living in it. Yeah, about 7 years full time.
How many miles?
I don't know. The odometer broke 2 years ago. But I put a lot of miles on. It's been rode hard, and actually it's broken down right now, and I just stay in it until I get it fixed. I'm looking to travel again, but I have to save up a little money. And
let me put you on the spot again. So we'll take you back several years ago to the open house at White Horse. Give me an example of what you might play there. What were you playing that night? Just a sample.
Well, busking for me and playing music, there's kind of differences that I do. While I'm busking, you're playing for walk-by crowds. So I've timed it where I play is at the Mass General Store on Biltmore Avenue. Big props to the Mass General Store for letting buskers play in their alcove.
Very nice, yeah.
Which has acoustically some qualities that I really enjoy as a dulcimer player. We're very quiet. They're very gentle instruments, and the acoustics there go good. I have 7 seconds to get people's attention from one end of that alcove to the other for them to stop enough to even say, hey, there's a busker. I'm going to give this guy $1 and listen to him. But in performance, I sing a lot more. I sometimes I feel, instrumentals just work better on the street because there's no crescendo, there's no like big punch. It's like I said before, in dance music, it's kind of repetitive. So it's kind of like a record playing over and over. And, but I do sing songs. And
well, give me an example. You have more than 7 seconds here. Give me an example of what you might play or sing.
I get up a little bit higher so you can see my fingers and see it. I'm seeing everything backwards. Okay. All right, let me see here. Was a dark, old day in May. My baby left me, Lord, she went away. Now she's gone, and I don't worry. Well, I'm sitting on top of the world. called me up on telephone, said, come back, baby, where you belong. Well, now she's gone, and I don't worry. I'm sitting on top of the world. Don't like my peaches, don't shake my tree. Stay out of my garden, won't you let my peaches be? Well, now she's gone, I don't worry. Well, I'm sitting on top of the world. Now she's gone, I don't worry. Well, I'm sitting on top of the world. When I'm sitting on top of the world.
Very nice.
Did you hear that?
Question for you. What's the most number of instruments you've ever played at one time? Like you're playing two there.
Well, I wish I had longer. I wish I had more arms, but I have a record out that I made last year. It was actually recorded in Philadelphia. It's called Bell Records, and I'm playing about 12 instruments on the record. So it sounds like there's a band behind me, but I'm actually overdubbing all the instruments. So a lot of the tunes are dulcimer, auto harp, banjo, fiddle, a little bit of Irish instruments like penny whistles and Irish instruments. What else? Mandolin is on it, and dobro. I'm playing a lot of dobro. I'm in love with the dobro. And,
Can you play? Some guys play like a drum, or they have a beating kind of thing.
I play that instrument as well. Actually, not on this record, but my next record, I'm going to do a bunch of Irish slip jigs and reels, and I played something called a boran drum or Irish drum, bodran, however it's pronounced phonetically.
We have just a little bit of time left, Lyle. Just talk a little bit now, if you would, about busking in Asheville. A lot of people do it. Tough gig. It can be, is it?
Can be tough. I mean, anytime you're playing outside in the elements, one, you have that variable, the elements. Right now it's colder. It's cold, and I'm still out here trying to do it. I've done it dead of winter before, if I can get away with it. Like I said, I don't have a fallback. I don't have a plan B. So I play. There's weather conditionals. There's, playing in the daytime and night, you have variables. I tend to play in the daytime, one, for safety, and two, Asheville seems to have two different kind of tourists, say seasonally in the summer. You have the tourists that come in the summertime and want to shop and go to the restaurants. And then you have the nighttime, like Beer City tourists, which are walking around kind of drinking. I'm not a big fan of people under the influence. So I tend not to play at night. There's safety concerns all the time. When you're out as a busker, you're basically a sitting duck. You're out there, you got a case open with lots of money in it. So since I've been here in Asheville, it's been about almost 6 years now. I've never felt unsafe as compared to other cities where I've been to, and this year maybe things are a little different. It's a little it's a little sketchy sometimes.
Okay, well, real quick, I have to jump in. Folks want to find out more about you. Best bet is what?
Best way, best way is that social media thing that we're all on. If you can find me on Facebook, Lyle Rickards, RICKARDS. There's Lyle Rickards Music page on Facebook, or you can just go ahead and friend me on my personal page. Instagram, same thing. I've acquired all this great technology now. Like, thank God for YouTube during pandemic and Facebook Live, or I wouldn't have made a living. We're all on a very big boat this year, and we all had to sit at home and figure out what to do. And I did a lot of Facebook, a lot of YouTube, and thank God for that.
Jump in here and thank you for being my guest. Second half hour on the Blaine's World Show. Hope to see you soon. Stay with me as I go off the air.